At just 18 years old, this boy was able to solve math problems that even the top professors at his university couldn't imagine solving. In fact, the same problems had taken those professors years to figure out, but this boy could solve them in just one look. However, he never wanted to show off his abilities in front of others. So how did a simple janitor end up defeating some of the greatest mathematicians of his time? Why did he always keep his talent a secret? And what happened the day everyone finally discovered the truth about him? That's exactly what we'll talk about in today's story, which is called Good Will Hunting. So, let's begin. The story starts at a huge university in America. Inside a classroom, a highly respected math professor named Gerald is teaching his students. Towards the end of the lecture, he tells them that he has written a very tough math problem on the board outside the classroom. He explains that it took him years of hard work to solve it himself, so if any student can solve it before the next semester, their name will be recorded in MIT's official tech record. For a student, this would be a huge honor. Wishing them good luck, the professor leaves the class. At the same university, there's a young man named Will who works as a janitor. After class ends, while cleaning, Will notices the math problem written on the board. He stares at it for a while, trying to figure out what the solution might be. Later, after finishing his daily shift, Will goes to a bar with his close friend. His best friend's name is Jen. But today, Will doesn't stay too long with Jen. Instead, he goes to the restroom, stands in front of the mirror, and keeps thinking about the math problem. Since childhood, Will's brain has been extraordinary. He can memorize and recall things with ease. That night, he spends a long time calculating, but still doesn't reach the final solution. Yet, he can't find peace until he cracks it. No matter where he is, the only thought running in his head is how to solve that math problem. A couple of days later, while cleaning the floors at the university, Will notices the hallway is empty. He grabs the chalk and begins solving the equation on the board. The next day, some of the professor's students rush to Professor Gerald and ask him who the student was that solved the impossible problem. Hearing this, Gerald is shocked. He quickly heads toward the blackboard. And when he arrives, he sees for himself that someone has indeed solved the problem perfectly. Gerald is stunned. He can't believe how anyone could have cracked it so flawlessly, and that too so quickly. On the other side, Will was spending time with his friends. As much of a genius as Will was in terms of intelligence, he was just as uncontrollable when it came to his anger. For example, today while driving with his friends, he suddenly noticed a guy on the street. The moment he saw him, Will recognized him right away, because a few days ago, that same guy had started a fight with him for no reason and had beaten him up badly. So today, as soon as Will saw him, he instantly jumped out and began to beat him in return. Since Will had a group of his friends with him this time, they all joined in and together they badly injured that guy and his buddies. But eventually, when the police arrived, everyone had to stop except for Will. He just couldn't hold himself back. At one point, in a burst of rage, he even ended up hitting one of the police officers by mistake. And because of that, Will was arrested right there on the spot. The next day at the university, Professor Gerald brought up the incident in front of all his students. He could never believe that such a brilliant mind existed in his own class, yet he still had no idea who the student really was. Addressing everyone, he said, "Whoever solved my problem, please step forward and accept your honor." But after a long silence, no one stood up. That's when the professor realized that maybe the student wasn't even present in the class. So, trying to manage the situation, he gave them another challenge. He told the class that he had written a second math problem on the board outside, a problem that had taken him 2 full years to solve. Even though he didn't expect his students to be able to crack it, he was doing this in hopes of drawing out that hidden genius. Meanwhile, Will spent an entire day in jail. The very day he got out, he went straight back to his janitorial job at the university. And there, he noticed the new problem on the board. Without hesitation, he started solving it. But just as he was about to finish, Professor Gerald and one of his colleagues happened to walk out of class and catch sight of him. Seeing a mere janitor scribbling on the board, the professor scolded Will harshly and sent him away. But when Gerald looked more closely at what Will had written, he was stunned. The problem that had taken him 2 years of effort, this boy had solved with an incredibly simple method. Yet by the time they went looking for him, Will had already vanished. He had left and gone back to spending time with his friends. Later that night, Will and his buddies were hanging out at their usual bar. As always, they were drinking and chatting. Will's best friend Jen began flirting with a girl there. To impress her, Jen started telling a bunch of lies, claiming that they were in the same class, but maybe she didn't remember. When the girl asked him more about the class, Jen confidently said he had seen her in a history class. But just then, another guy from that girl's class showed up. He began questioning Jen further about history, asking him several things to prove whether he really knew it. Very quickly, Jen got stuck and couldn't answer. The guy then began mocking and humiliating Jen in front of everyone. But right at that moment, Will stepped in. He had been listening to the conversation all along, and he wasn't about to let his best friend be insulted. Will calmly answers each and every one of the questions and even goes beyond the syllabus, explaining things they would only be studying later. Will's point is clear. The same knowledge these students are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to acquire, he has gained simply by sitting in a library. Eventually, the guy arguing with him realizes he can't keep up and walks away. Will then returns to his group of friends, but the girl who witnessed everything is quite impressed by him. The girl's name is Skylar. She comes over to Will, apologizes on behalf of her classmates, and starts a conversation with him. At the end, she gives him her phone number and tells him that they should meet again. Meanwhile, Professor Gerald continues searching for Will and finally discovers that he's gotten into some legal trouble. In fact, today, the court is about to give its final verdict. Because Will had struck a police officer during the fight, he had been granted temporary bail, but was required to keep appearing in court. Now, the final judgment was about to be announced. So, Professor Gerald goes to the courthouse to see him. Will is representing himself in the case, but this time he doesn't manage to escape the law. He already has a long list of charges in his past and has been in jail multiple times. And now, since he assaulted a police officer, he has no choice but to face punishment or else pay a $50,000 fine. But because he has no money for such a fine, the only way he can be released is if someone influential comes forward to recommend bail for him. It's here that we learn the truth. Will has no parents, no relatives, no family at all. He grew up in an orphanage from childhood. The only people he has are his childhood friends, but of course, none of them are in a position to arrange his bail. So Will directly calls Skylar, planning to ask her for help. But when Skylar talks to him playfully and lightly, Will feels hesitant and awkward. He just can't bring himself to actually ask for help. A little while later, Professor Gerald comes to meet him in person. At first, Will doesn't recognize him. When the professor introduces himself, Will immediately asks what he wants from him. Gerald explains that he has spoken to the court and requested that they release Will into his custody, but only on 2 conditions. Curious, Will asks what those conditions are. The professor says he saw Will solving the math problem, so the first condition is that Will must occasionally work with him on solving mathematics problems. The second condition is that Will has to spend time with a therapist. Will quickly agrees to the first condition, but strongly refuses the second. Why should he see a therapist? He doesn't need one. But in the end, he has no real choice, because compared to going back to jail, accepting the conditions is much better. So time passes this way. With each math problem, Professor Gerald is more and more astonished. It feels as though he has discovered a mathematician even greater than himself, and this makes him extremely happy. But when it comes to the second condition, therapy, things don't go smoothly at all. The first therapist called in for Will is treated very badly. Will mocks him, calling him gay as an insult, and the therapist storms out in anger. Later, another therapist is brought in to help Will with his anger issues and mental health, but Will refuses to cooperate with him either. Instead, he starts rambling nonsense and deliberately saying ridiculous things, making it impossible for the therapist to do his job. Because of Will's behavior, that therapist also refused to continue treating him and walked away. Now, the professor had only one option left, his old friend Sean. From his way of speaking and his demeanor, it was clear that Sean was a highly skilled therapist. One day, while Sean was teaching his class, Professor Gerald came to meet him. He explained everything about Will, saying that Will wasn't like other kids. He had the brain of a true genius, but his anger and reckless behavior could completely destroy his gift. At first, Sean wasn't willing to get involved. But after Gerald's constant insistence, Sean finally agreed to meet Will. In their first session, Sean spoke to him in a calm and normal way. But as usual, Will acted rude and disrespectful. He refused to take Sean seriously, answered questions with mocking replies, and constantly tried to twist Sean's words. Just like with the others, at one point Will even insulted Sean directly. But since Sean was a professional, he knew how to keep himself calm. Will had read some of Sean's books, and inside Sean's office, he noticed a painting Sean had done himself. Will began analyzing it and then said something cruel. "Looks like you married the wrong person." Hearing this, Sean's face hardened. Will had found his weak spot, Sean's late wife. Will started making ugly comments about her, even suggesting she must have run off with another man. That was too much. For the first time, Sean snapped. He grabbed Will by the throat and warned him never to say another word about his wife again. After that, Will left, and Gerald rushed inside to apologize for what had happened. But unlike the other therapists, Sean wasn't going to quit. He said he would meet Will again at the scheduled time next week. Days passed. That evening, Will met Skylar again. They spent time together, and for the first time in his life, Will felt a real connection outside of his group of friends. Skylar's presence brought something new into his world. Slowly, their relationship began to grow stronger, and Will genuinely started to enjoy being with her. The next week, Will once again sat down with Sean. This time, Sean took him to a lake. Sitting there, Sean opened up about what had happened during their last meeting. He admitted that after Will's harsh words about his wife and that painting, he couldn't stop thinking about it. But eventually, he realized that Will was just a kid. Why should he let himself be hurt by the words of a boy? Sean then tried to explain something deeper. He told Will, "You can read a book about flowers and learn everything about them, their colors, their qualities, but you'll never truly know a flower until you smell it. You can study history, you can read about war and battles, but you'll never really understand until you've been on the battlefield yourself. Maybe you've been with many women, maybe even spent nights with them, but you've never experienced real love. Because not everything in life can be learned through knowledge. Some things you have to feel through experience." Will sat silently, listening without saying a word. Sean continued, "You told me my wife left me for another man. That's not true. She did leave me, but only because she died. She had cancer. I was with her in the hospital until her very last breath. You may know what relationships mean in theory, but you'll only understand their true value when you lose someone you love. When I look at you, yes, I see a genius, a brilliant young man, but I also see fear. Fear of trusting anyone, fear of being betrayed by the people closest to you. And that fear is because you grew up alone, an orphan. Only you know that struggle. No matter how many books someone reads, they'll never feel what you've been through." With that, Sean walked away, leaving Will in deep thought. For the first time, Will seemed calm, as if Sean's words had reached him. He began to realize some of his mistakes, and slowly a change started to come over him. Meanwhile, at the university, the top professors kept bringing complex math problems to Will. Problems they struggled with for days, Will solved in just an hour. Everyone was astonished by his ability. At the same time, his sessions with Sean also began to change. Their understanding grew, and they started spending hours talking. One day, for the first time, Will opened up on his own. He told Sean that recently he had started liking a girl. He spent a lot of time with her, and she seemed to like him too. But he was afraid to tell her how he really felt. When Sean asked him why, Will explained, "Right now, she and I don't know everything about each other. That's why we seem perfect together. But if we get closer, if we start a real relationship, eventually we'll see each other's flaws. And maybe then we'll realize we're not perfect for each other after all." Hearing this, Sean shares another story with Will. He tells him that his own wife had a habit. Whenever she was tense, she would fart frequently, even in her sleep. But Sean never felt that this made her imperfect. To him, it was just a small, mischievous part of their relationship. That was the real essence of love. He knew everything about his wife, and she knew everything about him. Sean then tells Will, "How perfect you both are separately doesn't matter. No person can ever be perfect on their own. What really matters is how perfect you are together with each other." These words strike deep in Will's heart. He realizes that he shouldn't be afraid to trust someone. So, after nearly 2 weeks of disappearing, Will finally goes to meet Skylar. During this time, he had completely vanished, and Skylar had tried many times to contact him, but failed. Will explains that he had been very busy and even apologizes for staying away. He wants to be friends again like before. Skylar doesn't react much and simply forgives him, though she says she can't go out that day because she has too much studying to do. But this time, Will has learned to claim his place in the relationship. Because of that, their bond begins to heal again. They decide to go watch a dog race together, where Skylar asks Will about his family. Will, who is just as skilled at lying as he is at studying, makes up a story. He says he has 12 brothers and that his parents live far away, so he doesn't see them often. Once again, Will and Skylar share an intimate moment. Their relationship keeps getting stronger. Later, Will even introduces Skylar to his friends. She laughs, has fun, and gets along well with them. But when it's time to go home, Skylar again asks Will about his parents. She tells him she wants to meet his family. Will, however, keeps dodging the subject and sends her home without answering clearly. Meanwhile, Will's friendship with Sean has also grown stronger. They share everything with each other. Days pass this way, until one day Professor Lambo visits Sean to ask about Will's progress. Since Will has started gaining some control over himself, Lambo now wants him to focus on his future. But Sean disagrees. He says there's no need to rush. He's understood Will enough to know that the boy truly is a genius, but he still needs time. He needs to discover what he actually wants to do in life. He's not mature enough yet. Lambo doesn't accept this. He has already brought job offers for Will from many top places. He insists that Will's talent must be used, because with his mind, he could solve some of the greatest mysteries in mathematics. Sean still says the same thing. Will needs more time, and he must find his own path. But Lambo doesn't listen. So when Will is told to go for an interview, he sends one of his friends instead. His friend, once there, starts saying random nonsense to the professors. Yet even then, because of Will's remarkable reputation, they still request him to join and even offer a starting salary of $85,000. But as per Will's instructions, his friend doesn't take it seriously and just walks away. The truth is, Will can never live under anyone's orders. That's why he has never been able to bring his brilliance into an institutional framework. One day, while spending time with Skylar at a cafe, he sees how busy she is with her books. She has an exam coming up. When Will helps her solve an organic chemistry question, she is stunned. Organic chemistry is extremely tough, yet he solves it easily. Until now, she had only seen his math skills, but now she realizes he knows a lot about chemistry too. In fact, he has deep knowledge in almost every subject. This impresses her even more. That night, they spend more time together, and the next morning, Skylar asks Will to come with her to California after finals. She has to go there for her admission, and since she has truly fallen in love with him, she pleads with him to move there and settle with her. But this strikes at Will's pride. He flat out refuses. When Skylar once again asks about his family, this time, Will doesn't lie. He can't bring himself to. As we've seen from the beginning, Will has a hard time controlling his anger. So now, taking everything into account, he finally tells her the truth. He admits that he grew up in an orphanage, endured countless hardships, and made it to this point by surviving all of that. There's no point in hiding anymore. He starts revealing everything. And here we clearly see the fear Sean once spoke about. Will is terrified of trusting anyone. Even though he loves Skylar deeply, he doesn't know if she truly loves him back. He fears that maybe she's only with him just to pass time, not out of real love. Today, in a fit of anger, Will tells her that he never loved her and walks away. But the truth is, Skylar wasn't spending time with him just for company. She truly loved Will, something he never realized. Actually, Will didn't even give her a chance to explain. From childhood, he had been deceived so often that before anyone could deceive him again, he would reject them first. That's exactly what he did this time. Deep down, though, Will loved her a great deal. A week later, he goes to see the professor. The previous week, the professor had given him a mathematical problem, one they had been working on for years without success. Will solves it in just a few weeks, almost playfully, and the professor is overjoyed. When the professor asks why Will behaved the way he did at the last interview, Will bluntly says he has no interest in all those things. That angers the professor, and he speaks to Will sharply. Will, who has been frustrated for a long time, begins to treat the professor poorly too. He tells him he enjoys solving math for himself, but he cannot spend his life teaching others those problems like some drudgery. He has no interest in the kind of interviews where people work on problems year after year. Those problems mean nothing to him. In a rage, Will sets fire to the paper on which he'd solved the problem. The professor is stunned. What has he done? Will starts to walk away, and the professor calls after him in deep regret, saying it would have been better if they had never met. Then he wouldn't have had to watch such a bright life waste away before his eyes. He says this with great sorrow. Still, Will keeps his word and does not go to the job offer arranged by NASA. He does go to an interview there, but when the people who are supposed to interview him try to explain how his mathematical talent could help advance national defense or even rocket technology, Will again says he's not interested. He refuses to be bound by anyone's rules. Sean keeps trying to make Will understand. You have incredible intelligence, a gift from God. Why waste it? Even if not for yourself, don't let this knowledge be squandered carelessly. But once again, Will and Sean argue. Over time, their relationship had become like that of close friends, so Will sulks and walks away. Outside, Will calls Skylar a trembling guilty call and asks her pardon for the way he treated her. Skylar, meanwhile, sits holding a hope. Maybe Will would agree to go with her to California. But that doesn't happen. Instead, Will calls to congratulate her on getting into the new university and hangs up. Skylar, left alone, breaks down and cries uncontrollably. She had loved Will from the heart, but Will simply could not understand that. After this, Will stops meeting the professor and also quits therapy. Days go by with no trace of him because he has taken a job at a construction site with some friends. One day, a friend says to him, even 20 years from now, I'll probably still be here and won't regret it. But if 20 years from now I see you still stuck where you are, that will be my greatest regret. The friend's words strike at Will, but he keeps insisting that Will's intellect deserves far better places. If Will wanted, he could build a much brighter future for himself. Why then did he ignore that $85,000 salary offered at his first interview? Will should have gone. The friend repeats again and again that Will shouldn't waste the talent God gave him on a construction site. We would give our lives to help you reach what you can be, he says, but you don't even value it. He goes on, I always imagined once, when I dragged you out of your broken down house, that if I knocked on your door and found you gone to make a better life, that would be the happiest day of my life. These words make Will think. Even the professor had explained so much to him, but today his friend's words feel different. After a long time, Will returns to Sean. For the first time, Will tells Sean about his family. After his father died, his mother remarried. His stepfather was a cruel man. He drank every day, beat Will's mother unjustly, and even used Will to vent his anger, abusing him physically. Will clings to Sean and begins to cry because Sean is the only person in his life who has understood him deeply. This is the first time Will truly cries. All the pent-up carelessness, all the habits of neglect and hardened indifference that had lived inside him pour out at once. And within a few days, from all the job offers he had received so far, Will finally chooses one for himself and goes for the interview. This time, he won't be careless. By now, quite some time has passed, and today Will turns 21. His friends decide to give him a surprise. They didn't have much money, but together they bought an old car, fixed it up, and presented it to him as a gift. For Will, this becomes the greatest gift of his life. He has straightened out his path. His life is finally moving in the right direction. But still, something feels missing. To fill that void, Will sets out today. He stops in front of Sean's house and leaves a letter in his mailbox, but doesn't meet him face to face. When Sean comes down and opens the letter, he finds Will has written that he is chasing after a new horizon, that there's someone he needs to meet. And of course, we all know who that girl is. Taking the old car his friends gave him, Will drives off toward California, because now he's no longer afraid. He wants to leave behind all the pain and struggles of his past. He is going to Skylar. On the other side, when Will's friends come to call him at his broken-down house, they find no one there. Yes, exactly what Chucky once said has finally happened. And because of that, deep inside, he feels truly happy for his friend. And that's where today's movie Good Will Hunting comes to an end. This film carries many lessons. What did you learn from it? What did you realize? Share your thoughts with me in the comments, and make sure you subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for staying with us until now. See you again in a new video. Until then, stay well, stay healthy. Bye-bye.